How would you briefly define Kanban in the context of scaling Agile?
That's you asked a very big question in a very short moment there. Let's start with the basic definition of Kanban, right? Basic definition of Kanban is it's a visual process that helps you optimize the flow of value. So we believe that everything that we're working on is potentially valuable. It can, and when we deliver it to customers, there will be value. The visual process that we use, which usually ends up being a pull system, that is Kanban, to make sure things flow from beginning to end as smoothly as possible. That is Kanban.
Would you like to, give some certain, techniques or a few points maybe which can help to make that decision better in terms of how we can use Kanban for a scaling platform as well?
The first thing we need to dissociate, and another myth busting thing here, right? First thing we need to dissociate is scaling does not have to be complicated. It does not have to be complex. Automatically, people think scaling, they go, oh no, we need something very complicated, complex, because we're talking about more than one team. How is this going to work? How are we going to coordinate? It turns out simple solutions work really well. They're not easy, but they're simple. And that's where things like using lean principles or using Kanban comes into play.
Are you a Scrum Master or Agile coach who is juggling multiple teams, projects, and priorities? Feeling like you are constantly on fire instead of making progress? We get it. Scaling Agile can be a complex thing, leaving you tangled in frameworks and frustrated by limitations. But what if there was a simpler way using Kanban? Join us as we chat with Prateek Singh on Scaling Simplified with Kanban. We'll show you how to navigate the chaos and embrace the flow with this powerful approach. Prateek Singh is an author, speaker, and co host of the podcast show The Drunk Agile. He has been in the Agile trenches for 20 years, rocking every role from engineer to coach to director. Now, as head at learning at Pro Kanban, he shares his expertise through speaking, blogging, and consulting. He's also written the popular books Scaling Simplified with Kanban and Kanban Pocket Guide. Join us as Pratik shares his practical wisdom and insights.
Hello, Pratik. Welcome to the podcast by Agile Coaching Roundtable. It's great pleasure and honor having you on our show. And welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. More than happy to be here.
Okay, so maybe just would want to check with you, how is it to be on the other side of the table? Because you have your own podcast show, so how does it feel to be on the other side of the table?
Frankly, it doesn't feel that different because our podcast is very conversational style, as we have been talking before we started. That's also very conversational, so it's not that different, just because it's just people having conversation. So except for the whiskey, it's too early in the day for whiskey for me, so yeah.
Okay. So maybe today we would want to have a conversation on the topics of maybe scaling using scaling agile or on your book specifically. So to begin with, for the people who do not understand the term Kanban, so because that is the term that is used very loosely, and so for our audiences and for the listeners, how would you briefly define Kanban in the context of scaling Agile?
You asked a very big question in a very short moment there. Let's start with the basic definition of Kanban, right? Basic definition of Kanban is it's a visual process that helps you optimize the flow of value. So we believe that everything that we're working on is potentially valuable. It can, and when we deliver it to customers, there will be value. The visual process that we use, which usually ends up being a pull system, that is Kanban, to make sure things flow from beginning to end as smoothly as possible. That is Kanban. As you said, there are multiple misconceptions about Kanban. People
Correct.
think if you put up a board, it's Kanban. No, there are a lot of things that go into it. So I think those were two of your questions already, which was what is
Yeah.
the what is Kanban and the misconceptions. And when it comes to scaling, at least in my view, and everyone has different definitions of scaling as well. In my view, when we talk about the flow of value to customers, we're usually doing things like working on user stories or working on epics or features, whatever that is. As we go up that ladder, as we talk about going from stories to features to epics, whatever that breakdown structure is, and we optimize the flow at those different levels, that for me is scaling. How we optimize the flow of value to customers, either at those levels or by broadening our Kanban system. Optimizing the flow of value more and more, that is scaling. So I don't know if I answered all your questions, but I think I
Yes,
tried.
yes, you did.
Yeah.
No, no, you
Okay.
did.
I think maybe since we are at the very initial level of understanding what Kanban and what scaling is, obviously one of the core principles or core thing beneath the Kanban that I always believe is the lean principles, right?
Mhm.
So how does understanding lean principles prepare or help organizations for scaling Kanban effectively? Would you like to talk about that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll even double down on that question to kind of go, whether you're doing Kanban, whether you're doing Scrum, whether you're doing Safe, whatever you're doing, uh, understanding those lean principles is going to help you do whatever you're doing better. Kanban is the thing that comes closest to lean, in my opinion. But whatever you're doing, understanding lean principles will help you do those things better. If you summarize, it's actually very simple. What all lean tells you to do is figure out how an idea becomes value for customers, again, gets delivered. uh, Figure out what is causing delays in that process, uh, remove waste to improve that process, and then continuously keep improving. Do the whole thing over and over again. And if you think about almost any agile framework, any agile method, that's essentially what they're doing. We're saying, let's figure out how we get stuff to customers and keep iterating and improving this thing, keep improving this thing. Whether, as I said, whether you're doing Kanban, Scrum, Safe, whatever you're doing, understanding lean will only make it better.
Absolutely. And I like the point that uh, you just did not restrict it to just a Kanban. You also expanded it to other
Mhm.
agile frameworks or methods or processes, whatever you want to call, because that is one of the things that people feel that, as you rightly mentioned, that I mean, closest to lean is Kanban, right? And people assume that lean is equivalent to Kanban. And whenever we want to work or maybe use lean principles, so people say, oh, but then that you'll have to use Kanban for that, right? So that's
Yeah,
the misconception people have. And I'm glad that you again busted one more myth, saying
yeah,
that it can wherever we want. And if we have to look it in a way, uh, even Scrum promotes, say, lean principles, right? So we say
yeah.
that pull work, I mean, pull
Hmm.
system, when we talk about maybe do not, we say eliminate waste, so do not accumulate, just keep it simple. So
Hmm.
basically, we do have such principles, lean principles in, as you rightly mentioned, different frameworks of Agile, but people only think that Kanban is the thing that promotes lean principles, right? Right?
Yeah. And I'll go even further, Rama. You make a really good point. I'll go
Mhm.
even further. You can use Kanban inside of Scrum. You can use Kanban inside of Safe. These things are, that's why I like the strategy of Kanban, because whenever I go and work with teams or organizations, I don't have to worry about what they're doing right now, because we can just overlay these lean principles in the form of Kanban on top of whatever they're doing right now. And you don't have to stop doing Scrum to do Kanban. You don't have to stop doing safe to do Kanban. We can do both at the same time and get benefits of both at the same time.
Yes, and since uh, you have already broken down, or maybe given in terms of what the myths are, or what the certain practices that people believe in terms of Kanban, uh, I would definitely like to understand a few challenges, because these are certain personal experiences that I have come through. uh, in terms of the challenges, when we are scaling in terms of be the process, in terms of the products, or anything in terms of scaling that we do, there are certain challenges, which Kanban team or people feel that Kanban cannot be a perfect fit or a good fit when we go beyond a single team setup, especially in terms of scaling. uh, would you like to give some certain techniques, or a few points maybe, which can help to make that decision better, in terms of how we can use Kanban for a scaling platform as well?
Yeah, I'll have to take the long way around to come to your answer here. The the first thing we need to dissociate, and another myth busting thing here, right? First thing we need to dissociate is scaling does not have to be complicated. It does not have to be complex. Automatically, people think scaling, they go, oh no, we need something very complicated, complex, because we're talking about more than one team. How is this going to work? How are we going to coordinate? It turns out simple solutions work really well. They're not easy, but they're simple. And that's where things like using lean principles or using Kanban comes into play to say, this is the simplest thing we can do. Put up a board, look at what's going on in our system, try to limit WIP, establish our expectations on how long things should take to get done, and let's just do it at a higher level. Let's do it for the entire organization. It immediately gives you transparency. It immediately gives you dependencies. It immediately gives you an understanding of how long things are taking. It gives you forecasting. All these things just start coming out of this just with the simple setup. Now, obviously, that simple setup is not going to be enough. You will need to add other things to it. But my preference is you start simple and add things rather than do something very complicated and then figure out how to remove things from it. But yeah, that's why for me, scaling probably the place, any process, the place I will start is the simplest thing I can do, and then add other things to it as needed. And I think that's a very I have a few very good friends who think that way, but I think most of the agile industry thinks of scaling as, oh, we need to employ this big complicated thing. Yeah.
Yes, and also while you were talking about this is what my recent experience has also been with one of the agile teams within our organization. Obviously, when we look at things, what we need to improve from here, and it's also important to understand what are the things that we can first get rid of, rather than adding more to the processor, rather than adding more things to to better ourselves. I think the first starting point should be is, can we cut down, or can we minimize on certain things which will help us be better, rather than looking at adding of more things.
Yep. Absolutely. Fully agreed. You make progress by removing things, not necessarily by adding things.
Yes. So since you talked about, I mean, since both of you talked about maybe work in progress or maybe WIP limits, right? So maybe let's maybe talk more about that. So if you can just share some practical strategies to
Mhm.
establish that pull-based system and control WIP across multiple teams working on different products or the same product, maybe.
Yeah, it's again, Rami, you have a habit of asking four questions in one, so I'll go there. The strategies for employee. Well, actually, before we get to strategies, you mentioned something that's actually very interesting, and I think your audience will be interested in is you mentioned pull system and whip. Those two things are interlinked. A pull system is one where the team or the organization that is represented there says, I'm ready to pull work and I'm going to pull work in now. A push system is whether your team is ready or not, someone pushes work onto you. So a pull system is where we pull work based on capacity. When we have capacity available, we can pull work. Now, connecting that to the WIP piece, WIP at that point, your work in progress at that point, is is a representation of your capacity. Say, at any point of time, we as a team can work on not more than 10 things. So when that number of things active drops to 9, it means, okay, we have capacity to pull something in. Elevate that to the org level. We could say things like, and let's say we're working on these things called features. We can say things like our teams can only handle, as an organization total, we can only handle 20 features at a time. We have 15 teams and we can only handle 20 features at a time. So what that means is, as soon as a feature gets done, we have the capacity to pull the next feature in. We at all times we can say we don't want to overburden our organization, and we also don't want to run the organization under our capacity either. So that creates that pull system at that organization level. And I don't remember if you asked this question or not, but I'll go there. The higher up you go in that level, like for example, initiatives or OKRs, whatever you
Mhm.
want to call them, the higher up you go, the more important that limiting of a WIP is. Because every time someone starts a new initiative, it spawns off multiple epics, which spawns off multiple features, spawn off multiple stories. So limiting WIP, the higher you go, will give you better rewards, in my opinion.
Yes, yes, I did ask that question. So as I mentioned, I asked multiple things in a single question. So that was one of the questions.
See,
Give it
my
over
my
to you.
my answer, my WIP for answering questions is one. So when you ask me a question, I have to break it up into multiple questions. By the time I'm on the third one, I forget the fourth one.
Yes, absolutely. And since we are talking about the whip and no, the pull and push, I have a very simple and a very common question is that who decides the whip? And I know that the answer, but I just wanted to understand if it is at the organization level or if it is at a team level. Do
Mhm.
we still say that the team has the autonomy to decide whatever level the team is working on, and they make the decision to decide what the whip for the team should be?
Absolutely. So for me, it always comes down to the team itself, to the people actually doing the work, the people who are represented on that board. So a team should the team should collectively decide what their whip is, and they are going to be wrong. When they do it, they are absolutely going to be wrong. Now, over time, they need to watch, are things taking too long? Are things getting done on time? And then change that whip as they need to. Same thing for the organization. We as an organization, if we have an org level board, maybe the managers of the teams come together or the directors come together and say, hey, what is the right number of things that we need to manage, and so that things don't take too long to get done. We haven't talked much about this, but the more things you work on, the longer those things take to get done. So we need to figure out, whoever is involved in that system needs to figure out how many things they should have active at any point in time.
Yes, yeah, that was a very basic questions that people don't understand when we start having certain whips, or maybe just for example, maybe I'm bringing another term is item age or something
Mhm.
like that in terms of the flow metrics that we have. The common question is like, uh, can should we give that autonomy to the team to decide or to make that decision? If we give them the autonomy, then maybe we might under utilize or underplan as in terms of the capacity or in terms of how the utilization should be. So obviously it makes more sense when we say that whoever is working at the center of it should make the decision together. And since we also move from the team to the organization level in certain way in terms of the OKRs or the what we can say is initiatives as well. And at that level, we discussed, or maybe we touched based on maybe the directors or everyone coming together to make that decision. Now at this level, what practical strategies can be implemented to establish a pull based system and control WIP uh, in a way that if this is a large scale organization, right, and maybe they are working for different portfolios, or I'm particularly talking about a scaling project where they're working on a multiple portfolios. How do you think, if this team size is large enough, everyone can come together to decide upon, yes, this should be, where we should say, okay, hold on, let's not pull any initiative, or let's not have any OKR now beyond this.
Yeah, it's interesting. The way I like thinking about that is at a team level, you have multiple individuals coming together to figure out what is our collective capacity. At a
Mhm.
level above that, you have multiple teams coming together to figure out what is our collective capacity. It's almost the same thing. It's team A saying, "Hey, we can at best handle two epics at a time." Team B goes, "We can at best handle one." And all the 10 teams give some random numbers like that, and we go, okay, it looks like we can have 15 epics active at any point in time. Now, as I said before, when the team comes up with their initial WIP, it's going to be wrong. That initial number 15 is probably going to be wrong too, because we're going to start discovering that, oh, there are all these dependencies that need to get eliminated. There are all these other things that are coming in the way. And over time, we have to watch flow and keep correcting it. But that's where it would come from, because then it becomes this thing where the teams bring in an input to say, I can only handle two things at a time, two epics at a time. And that input goes into that top level collective and becomes a number up there. Many Kanban teams at the team level start that way too. They go, oh, we've got 10 people. Let's say one thing per person. We're going to have a WIP of 10. Great, let's get started, and then over time we'll change it. Similarly, at the org level, we could say things like, for features, we'll have 2 features per team. Okay, 10 teams, 20. But let's start with that and observe over time how things go. You started to mention age and all that, and as you were saying that, the thing that kept coming to my mind was the Spider-Man quote of, with great power comes great responsibility. If I have been given the power to decide WIP, it is my responsibility to observe the system and adjust it so that we create the right results. It's not just that you get the power to decide this and then it's all good, you do whatever you want. You get the power, but you also have the accountability, the responsibility to make sure it's achieving the right results.
Absolutely true. I think uh, that is how you rightly summarize it. It's like, uh, how is the commitment and how is the accountability part over here? It's not just, making that decision in terms of the autonomy, but then what after that, whether we are committed or whether we are accountable to that aspect or not, is really important for a team to be successful. Yeah.
And also, what I would like to just add over here is, we think, I mean, majority of, say, leaders or managers or whatever, what they think is, I mean, if we leave that autonomy to the team members, as Vivek mentioned, less work would get done. And we are used to this type of old schooling kind of a project management or whatever we may call. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, it's a human psychology, right? I mean, if we get a lot of freedom, we tend not to misuse that freedom. And we know that, okay, we have to be responsible for the freedom that we are using, and we become more disciplined with the freedom that we have. And that's a human psychology. And I think we need to bring back this kind of a mindset with the team, saying that it's okay to give that autonomy to the team members and not make it a push system, then make it a pull system.
Yeah, and I think you started down that path, so I'll continue it, which is what is important for our customers is that work gets done. They
Correct.
don't care about people being busy. And unfortunately, a lot of management comes down to managing people and making sure people are busy, as opposed to managing work and making sure work is getting done. If you start
Absolutely.
focusing on work getting done, your team's lives will become easier. Your organization's lives will become easier. Your life as a manager, director, whatever you are, will actually become easier because you don't have to worry about people being busy. You just have to worry about things getting to customers.
Absolutely. I completely agree on that. And since we were also talking about features and maybe initiatives or epics, and so those are nothing but the work items,
Mhm.
right? And if we have to talk about those work items, how can work breakdown structure or WBS and the concept of potential versus actual value help prioritize the work in large scale agile environments?
So once again, I think those are three questions. So I'll try to
Oh
take these
God.
one by one. So first thing, work breakdown structure, and I'm not. There are multiple meanings for of work breakdown structure, and I want to be very careful. When I say work breakdown structure, I mean how does something that is a strategic element, like an OKR or something, translate into a high level deliverable, which translates into a lower level deliverable, which translates into something like a user story that a team works on. That's what I mean by work breakdown structure. So, how does an OKR translate into an initiative, which translates into a feature, which translates into an epic? Then that becomes a story. Whatever it is for your organization, that is what I mean by work breakdown structure. Because then we'll have to figure out if we are scaling up that structure, which level we want to work at, and which level do we want to improve flow on. Your second question, as far as I remember, was potential value. What is
Correct.
potential versus actual value? This is a thesis. This is something that we've gets both Dan Vacanti and I into trouble. And by the way, half the stuff, majority of the stuff I learned from Dan Vacanti. Don't tell him I said that. But it gets us into trouble because our thesis is that you don't know if something is valuable or not till you have delivered it.
Absolutely.
Before that, we can estimate value, but that's all it is. It's a guess. It's an estimate, and we don't know if something's valuable or not till you've delivered it. The problem with that, not the problem, but the problem that leads to is when you're talking about delivering values with stories, you're not putting in a lot of time. You're probably putting in something in the order of days to deliver this thing and figure out if it was valuable. You go up one level. Let's say your stories belong to features. Now you're putting in weeks. You go up another level. Let's say your features belong to initiatives. Now you're putting in months. So the longer these things take to get done, the more risk is involved in these. You don't know if something is valuable, but you're spending months working on it. That is why visualizing these higher level things on a Kanban board will help you make sure that these things are flowing properly. These things are actually getting done. So because we don't know value up front, because we only have an estimate of value, the only thing we can actually control is investment. We don't know return. We can control how much time, how much of our people's time we invest in something. So in the return on investment equation, the return is not determinable, investment is controllable. That is why we talk about controlling that investment by using something like a Kanban board. The analogous thing to investment in our world is cycle time, how long it takes us to get something done. And it probably becomes even more important at those higher levels than the lower levels.
Yes, absolutely. I think that is one of the simplest or maybe the best metric that we can have in place to determine the cycle time for each of, at each level. I mean, I'm not saying we should restrict it to story or to a feature, but I think it can also be applied to your initiatives or the OKRs to determine what the cycle time for us as a team is for getting this thing done. And while we are discussing on the potential and the actual value, since we also did bring in the cycle time, and I have a relative maybe somewhat similar to that, how do we establish, or can we say, clearly state the start or finish points? I mean, in terms of again, maybe this might be a collation of different thoughts over here, starting and finishing something, and in terms of uh, maybe the work, and I'm not saying the cycle time. What I'm trying to say is, how do we establish a clear start and finish points, and then also, effective and exit and entrance criteria, while also ensuring that we maybe in a certain way manage the blockers around all those things in terms of the interconnected way of while we are working in a Kanban approach, right? So maybe to re-summarize, or maybe to put it across in again in thoughts, as when we are working with multiple teams together in a Kanban setup, how do we ensure that if those are interdependent or interconnected teams, how do we ensure that there is certain starting point and there is certain exit points for these teams to ensure that the work is getting done?
Yeah, I again think there were 3 or 4 questions there, but I'm going to pick only one of those.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
let's talk about the idea of having these start and finish points. Forget about whether there are multiple teams working on this thing, or a single team working on this thing, or multiple organizations working on this thing. Let's put all that to the side. Let's keep it absolutely simple. When an idea comes into our organization, we have something like a discovery process to make sure that this is the right thing to work on. Then we have something like an understanding process, where we figure out, hey, do we understand this problem properly enough? Do we understand some sort of analysis? Or do we understand this properly enough? Do we understand the technical implications of this, the value implications, whatever it is? Do we understand that stuff? Then there is some sort of an implementation process, where we're like, okay, now we're building this thing. Now let's figure out how to build this, get all this stuff built. Then there's some sort of a delivery process, where we're pushing this out there and monitoring it, making sure things don't go down when we deploy this. And then there's most people at that point will say this thing is done. For me, yes, we could say this thing is done. At best, I think we could say this thing is delivered. Then there is a process after that, most likely, which is to say, is this thing doing the thing we expected it to do? Did we actually fulfill the customer's request? And that might take a month or two for us to figure that out. If you think about all of that, I describe probably 5 or 6 different stages there. The natural inclination for most organizations is to say, we will consider this thing started when we start doing that implementation bit, and we'll consider it done when we deliver this thing. Because Agile traditionally started with developers, we tend to care about the developer part of this workflow. So that could be a start and finish point. That could be something we say, this is started here, this is finished here. We could say that. But this is why, and I love the fact, Vivek, that you went towards multiple start and finish points. We could also say, what about when we first started doing discovery? From that point, how long does it take us to deliver this thing? What about when we first started doing analysis? From that point, how long does it take us to verify that the customer's needs were satisfied? You could have these multiple start and finish points, which will give you slightly different information. And the further out they are, in my opinion, the better idea you have for making commitments, for understanding how long it takes you to actually satisfy a customer's request. So yes, you could have start and end points that help you figure out how long it takes you to get work done. But you can also have broader start and finish points, which can help you understand how long it takes you to solve a customer problem.
Absolutely. So what I understood from what you're saying is, depending upon which flow we are talking about and in which context we are talking about, there could be multiple start and end points, isn't it? So if you're talking about a system in its whole, the start and end points could be different. And if you're just talking about maybe a flow of, say, one work item, it could be different. So depending upon that, the starting and finishing point would be different. Is it correct, or am I
It's
wrong in this?
almost. So what I'm trying to say is, there is a single flow for everything, potentially for at a particular level. Now, based on, as you're saying, Rami, based on what we want to understand, if our thesis is that it takes us really long to develop stuff once we start implementation, let's look at that small cycle time from implementation to delivery. If our thesis is it actually takes us longer to do analysis and all that upfront stuff. Let's look at that broader cycle time to find out where our potential bottlenecks in the system are, where things are taking a long time to get through.
Wow, I get it now. Yeah, yeah, that's clear. Yeah.
Right.
So maybe since we're talking about flow over here, right? So I want to just understand from the leader's perspective. So how can maybe leaders effectively apply the lead with the flow approach to manage complex dependencies, blockers, and diverse priorities within large organizations?
Yeah, this kind of takes me back to an earlier conversation we were having, which was about managing work rather than managing workers. And leading with
Hmm.
flow essentially is that. It is essentially saying, uh, I I want to manage the work. I want to manage the flow of work, the flow of value to customers. I don't want to go in and micromanage people. I,
Beautifully
I
put.
Yeah, I would even say, having been in that position multiple times, having been an engineering leader multiple times, I would even say I do not mind micromanaging work. I have no issues micromanaging work. I have a lot of issues micromanaging people. I have no issues micromanaging work. I want to make sure that my teams have the best support available to deliver value to customers. And the way I can do that is by paying attention to how long it's taking work to get done. I believe the people are doing the best they can, but what about our system is not helping them flow value to customers? That is leading with flow.
Hmm. Yes. So while you were saying micromanaging work and micromanaging people, would you like to talk more about it? I mean, is there a maybe I believe there is a very thin boundary, and I think most of the time people jump over it. So would you like to talk more on that?
Yeah, micromanaging work for me is saying things like, usually we get things done in 10 days or less. I see 3 work items right now that are at 9 days, which means things are taking longer than we expected to. I, as a leader, want to understand what is getting in the team's way to get it out of their way. Because if usually we get it done in 10 days or less, 9 days for 3 items means, I'm making multiple assumptions here, means that something has gone wrong with the system. These same
Correct.
people, these same individuals were able to get this stuff done in 10 days or less. So obviously nothing's changed there. Something's wrong with the system. I want to go in and find out, is this a real signal or is this just something that just happened? And help get whatever it is. Maybe people are blocked because testing environments are down. Maybe people are blocked because they're waiting on some other team to send them information. Whatever that is, that's what I mean by micromanaging work. I want to keep a really close eye on how things are going so that I can go help when help is needed. um, so that instead of me being the manager that every 10 minutes shows up, hey, are you doing the thing? Are you doing that thing? Let the work signal to me that, oh, something's gone wrong. Let me go find out if there's something I can do to help.
Wow, that I really love the summarization or the explanation of towards that point. And since we are talking about work, there is one important point that I feel I wanted to maybe bring into the conversation is now. Since it's related to us, associated to work, it's important aspect to understand how do we forecast or how do we anticipate work, right? In such kind of a system. Uh, would you like to talk something in terms of any techniques that can be helpful for forecasting delivery, obviously, and then in terms of the timelines and also prioritizing initiatives in a multi-team setup or maybe multi-product settings? Would you like to share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, let's
Three
start
questions.
with. I know. I was gonna say let's start with the forecasting bit, and then we'll get to the other bits. Yeah, we should limit our own whip, right? The forecasting bit is interesting because that's I think that is that is one of the primary reasons people try to scale, because all of a sudden they're not able to answer their customers' questions on when will it be done, and they're trying to do all this coordination to figure that out. Um, as I said earlier, keeping things simple helps us with coming up with easier techniques. And it sounds complicated, but it really is not. Monte Carlo methods, Monte Carlo simulations are it's a very easy technique, and trust me, it sounds much more complicated than it actually is. It's as easy as rolling dice. It's random sampling. It's a very easy technique that can help teams answer the question of when will they be done with an epic or with certain number of items. There are certain things we can add on top of the basic Monte Carlo simulation to then start talking about it across the org, which factors in things like how many things are we working on, or how little or lot of focus we have, because then that will change how long things will take to get done. We can factor in dependencies if we need to. We can factor in things like this team breaks their work up this way, this other team breaks their work up this way. We can make this model more as complicated as we need to, but we try to keep it as simple as we have to. We try to keep it as simple as possible, only complicated when we need to. Um, but this Monte Carlo simulation helps us then get an idea of when all the things that are active with us are going to get done. The second part of your question, so that's Monte Carlo simulations. Again, there's a lot more to talk about that. We don't have time for that here. But the second part of your question was more about prioritization. Um, I feel, and again, this is one place where Dan Vacanti himself has done a lot of work. Him and I have done a lot of work together on this. Uh, People keep doing prioritization at the wrong end of the process. Everyone prioritizes when we will start stuff. No one prioritizes when we will finish stuff. Your customers do not care about when you start stuff. Your customers care about when you finish stuff. So when it comes to prioritization, the most important prioritization decision you can make is of the things that are active with us right now, which one are we going to focus on so we can finish it? Not which one are we going to start next. Turns out which one we're going to start next is the second most important prioritization question, which is the very next thing we'll start. But the most important prioritization question is of the things that are active with us, how do we get those things to finish? How do we prioritize focusing on these things so we can finish them? Second question is, how do we prioritize what is the next thing we're going to pull as soon as capacity becomes available? We talked about the pull system earlier. How do we prioritize that? The least important prioritization question is, what is the order of our backlog? Because you all know, I'm sure you have seen this. You go in and you order your backlog, and 2 days later, something comes in that disrupts the order of the entire
Yes.
backlog.
Yes.
So why waste time on that? Why not figure out what can we complete and what can we pull in next, instead of going too far down the rabbit hole of prioritizing your backlog?
So it's again going back to start finishing and stop starting, isn't
Mm-hmm.
it? So just finish whatever you have in hand and then maybe think of picking up what you need to pick up next in terms of
Yeah,
priority.
yeah, and that's what again, I'm going to quote Dan Vicanti here. His thing was, without controlling WIP, prioritization is useless.
Wow.
Because the order in which you start stuff will does not matter at all if you're not controlling WIP, because things are not going to get done anyway. So if you're not controlling WIP, that prioritization is absolutely pointless for
Vivek?
all the reasons that you just mentioned, Ramya. For all the reasons you just mentioned. Yep.
Yes, absolutely. And maybe I think we are the very end of this conversation. And obviously we wanted to discuss more on the Monte Carlo technique as well. But I know it's uh, as you mentioned, it's just throwing a dice, but I am sure it's not that simple. But obviously, I think we can reserve that conversation for another podcast episode, and we
Yeah.
would like to discuss with you more on that. But I think I'm just moving away from that conversation to the Conway's law, and again, this is something that you have covered well, or maybe in details in the book. Of how does it impact the process and the product development when scaling, in an agile setup? Would you like to talk about that as well?
Yeah, Conway's Law, I think Melvin Conway came up with Conway's Law, and Dr. Conway is still around. And it is not necessarily a scientific law, but it is something, it is commonly observed. The idea with that is the setup of your organization will determine the product of your organization. How your
Wow.
process is set up is going to determine how long it takes you to get things done, what type of things you get done. And if you kind of reverse that, at least my take on Conway's Law is the reverse of that, is to say the setup of your organization will determine the flow of work through your organization. So if we are optimizing flow, we need to let flow determine the setup of the organization. It's a
Wow.
weird twist. Instead of right now, the way your organization is set up determines how things flow. If you have a department called a DevOps department, and if you have a department called a UX department, stuff goes in the UX department, goes to the engineering department, then goes to the DevOps department, then goes out. These are specific stages where handoffs are happening and things are probably sitting in queues. Now, instead, when you look at this and you say, I want to get rid of these queues, I want things to flow faster. Well, you might need to reorg to make things flow faster.
Correct.
Let the flow of your work determine the shape of your organization. Don't let the shape of your organization determine the flow of your work.
Wow, amazing. I love the way you put it. I mean, obviously explaining what it is and then reversing it and making it more sense. And again, this got me to think about implementing similar things about cross functionality in Scrum, right?
Mhm.
So when we say we want we need to have a cross functional team, that means that to get the work end to end, whatever things that we require need to be part of the single team, or
Yeah.
maybe need to be part of single system. So that's again another beautiful point that you mentioned. This is how we need to think. And yes, I agree to your point that your flow should determine what how long it will take, rather than maybe guessing how long it will take and then determine the rest of the things. And as Vivek mentioned, we just scratched the surface in terms of talking about different things. There are so many curious questions in me to ask you, but we will spare that for the another conversation. And for ending today's conversation, just a closing question. What advice would you give to aspiring practitioners who want to implement Kanban at scale in their organizations?
Yeah. The advice I'll give, and this is going to sound very counter to what we've been talking about. The advice I would give is don't even think about Kanban. Do not even think about Kanban. Think about things in terms of flow metrics. Think about things in what the thing that you're trying to improve is how long it takes to get things done. That is what we're trying to improve. From Just start measuring from the point something starts to the point that the customers are giving us feedback on it. How long does that take? Now let's figure out how we improve that. How do we become more efficient? How do we get better feedback to become more effective? How do we become more predictable with this stuff? It will naturally lead you down the path to Kanban or other things, but I would rather you start with the simple measurement of how long it takes to get stuff done. Because in your context, it might mean something completely different. It might not mean Kanban, it might mean something different. But what I would ask, the place I would start when you're looking to scale flow is let's measure how long it takes us to get things done, and then start looking at what we need to do to improve it.
Wow, amazing advice, I would say. And as we mentioned, there are so many things that we want to discuss, but we'll discuss as a second conversation whenever we do. And we learned so many things in this 1 hour of a conversation. I mean, these are the concepts. They were like put up here and there, lying here and there. You bind them together and made so much sense out of it. And I think whoever listens and watches this episode will learn a lot in terms of obviously busting myths, to understanding flow, to understanding work in progress, understanding limiting work in progress, understanding more, lean principles more deeply. And to be honest, whenever when we were brainstorming on doing this topic on, say, Kanban, or maybe scaling Kanban, scaling using Kanban for multiple teams and all. So we were very specific that we want to do this episode with you. And it took us so much time to maybe think about, should we reach, should we not, or what do we do? And how do we do, and what question to ask? There were so many things that were going around, and we are really happy that finally we were able to do this. So thank you so much, Prateek, for doing this, coming over and sharing such a great insights with us. It was a great talking to you.
No, thank you so much for both of you for having me over and for inviting me in, and hopefully your audience, hopefully this helps you. Hopefully this helps the audience to kind of start taking some of this stuff, and even if one of these things work for you, more than happy. So, and absolutely, if you would love to have a second conversation as well, if that falls into our calendars, yeah.
Yes, yes. Again, thank you, Pratik, for joining us, and for all our listeners and audience. If you want to explore more on this topic, I think I would suggest this book, Scaling Simplified: A Practitioner's Guide to Scaling Flow. Maybe you, if you want to explore more on this, this is where you will get to understand everything about whatever we have discussed, and maybe covering everything in 1 hour conversation is next to impossible. But if you want to explore more, this is where you can explore. So thank you again, Pratik, for joining in and sharing your thoughts. Thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for watching this episode patiently till the end. We hope you enjoyed the episode. We'll meet you again in the next episode. Till then, if you like our podcast show, then do like, share, subscribe, and let us know your feedback in the comment section. You can also listen to the episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Audible. Thank you.